studio.
Moshi Moshi friendos, I thought that I would sort of fill in the time between the next main channel video and vlog number 5 by bringing you a really quick tutorial. Again, this is going to be a little bit more of a discussion on how to repurpose old sketches. So sketches that feel a little blah, or if a lot of time has elapsed between old art and new art and you feel that you've improved, but that you still really like the composition, how can you kind of turn it into something else? For some reason, since downloading my cupcake brush, I've been really into cupcakes, so we're going to be using Auri again. She's become kind of like my example poster child, and we're going to turn her into like a cupcake princess, which is going to be really fun. And we'll go through the graveyard of my Procreate whips, and then let me know in the comments if I should fully render any of these. As usual, any resources will be linked in the description. I'll call them out as they appear on screen, and I hope you enjoy. So the first thing we're going to be looking at is this My Melody redraw. I bought these really cool cupcake brushes from Peach Sketch Studio on Etsy, and they actually have a lot of really different dessert brushes. I'll link them in the description because I really recommend their products. And so I got to thinking we could do almost like a Sweet Lolita sort of My Melody. So let's look at this composition first. So on the left is the original reference picture. On the right is the My Mellow that I drew in the middle of my tumor fiasco. Obviously my style has changed a lot since then, so keeping in mind the theme of sort of a Sweet Lolita, like cupcake based character, I decided to do a redraw. And I'm layering the original image. I'm going to cut it up with the lasso tool so that it is like perfectly lined up with my version of My Melody. And so I think that while mindful tracing can be great to develop muscle memory in beginners, it's also okay sometimes if you're doing kind of like a weird sort of anatomical pose to sketch above your reference image. So this isn't tracing, this is basically just using the anatomy as a guide, and this will be the subject of another video. But basically I'm just like cutting things to perfectly position my version of this with the original version of this so that we can make sure that it is proportional. So we're going to pretend basically that we just drew this now, and we want to make sure that like things are looking proportional. In regards to the redraw, because the way that I draw now is unproportional on purpose, we don't really care. We're going to be tracing over the original composition that I did for the most part, just because if you're tracing your own line art, it's kind of like, who cares? But you'll notice that we're making stylistic changes. So the fingers, as usual, smaller, chunkier. The eyes are different, adding aegyosal, adding sort of folds to the face, making the forehead bigger to suggest roundness. We're accessorizing more. And what I like to do is find interesting looking bases or interesting looking pictures of models, like people who model clothing, and use those pose for more dynamic little chibis here in the foreground. So you can experiment with that as you like, so that you find a composition that appeals to you and that adds the visual interest that you're looking for. And as placeholders, I'm not married to these cupcakes, but as placeholders, we'll use the cupcake stamp to decide where we want to put the food. But in a sketch phase, I'm usually doing very rudimentary shapes. So you don't have to use a stamp if you don't want to. You can just mark out where you want things to go. So I'll link the base that I used in the description. Let's go right to Auri. So luckily for Auri, all we have to worry about is this original drawing that I did of her. And I was kind of playing around with poses. Again, we'll put my sketch over the old one to make sure that anatomically we're abiding by the human body. I fleshed her out a bit more. I gave her sort of a more human proportion. I added a little bit of chub to the middle. I know that I want to change the arm positioning for the left arm. I fooled around a little bit with the legs. I decided to just reference my original leg pose, and I just redrew them. It's pretty easy to draw legs in this way. And so now we're going to start sort of experimenting with the other hand and the skirt And again, just sort of moving things around, scribbling a little. I figured that she would be most cupcake-like if she was sort of sitting on a stool. And you can see me really lock in here. So we've got the cupcake shape and then all of her little accessories. I'm a big fan of doing this like dripping icing sort of effect. I'm gonna do it on her horns the same way that I did my Christmas Krampus horns, and we're replacing her lanterns with a big round lollipops to kind of keep the sweet treat motif. So in the case of my mellow, we did a full redraw because the whole thing needed to be redone. In the case of Mari, this is more of an example of how you might redraw a character or even draw more images of a character using compositions that you've done in the past. So sometimes a resketch isn't just, oh well, I have this old line art that I never inked and I need to do something with it. You can reference your own art to basically further the meta of an original character, or even to draw something else. There's been a lot of commissions where I've sort of just had like anatomy studies that I have then turned into images of other people's OCs or portraits of other people, because anatomy studies, when they go well, there's no need really to like throw away line art even when you're practicing, or not line art, rather sketches, because those sketches can be repurposed and you can repose a sketch like we did with Mari. You can move around the legs, you can move around the arms. My original plan was actually to turn this image of Mari into a full character sheet, which I'll do eventually. But because I had just done the My Mellow cupcake thing, I figured that it would just be more thematic to do a redraw for this video. If we want to dissect Cupcake Mari, essentially her skirt is made up of like bulbous chiffon is the way that I like to think about it. And then there's like a train. So in this case, by sitting on the stool looks like the wrapping of the cupcake. The like bunching of the skirt is the cupcake. And then the icing, it looks like running icing, is the train of her skirt. And then her boots and her corset have the same motif as the poof she's sitting on, so it looks like the wrapper. And then you've got the dripping icing, and then you've got the lollipops, and she's holding a giant lollipop. And so that was kind of a fun way to recycle the circle shape of her lanterns, because I don't think lanterns and cupcakes go together, but cupcakes and lollipops go together. And this wasn't long, like from start to finish this took me maybe 20 to 25 minutes. Redrawing old line art is also a fun way to play around once you feel like you've improved, because you can very clearly track improvement from older works to newer works. So all this to say, there's a handful of reasons as to why you may choose to resketch on top of an older sketch, or to resketch something that you drew in the past, or to repurpose old line art. Line art doesn't always just have to kind of rot in your works in progress folder. We can use it to improve, we can use it to track improvement. And it's a fun little exercise, especially if you're doing poses that are kind of like weird or unruly. You may feel like it's good practice to pick a character and continuously draw them. So don't be shy, you know, to sort of assign your own Mari to, let's say, like, well, I'll just do sitting poses today. So all my warm-up sketches are going to be sitting poses. I'm going to draw Mari sitting 15 to 20 times so that I can really nail this leg position. So, for example, in my case, I would do the leg position that the Mari on the right is posing. And so I would like redo that a bunch of times. And through doing it a bunch of times, I develop that muscle memory. And that's what I was talking about earlier with my mellow. Sketching on top of references sometimes is a good way. Doing the same reference over and over and over and over again is a great way to develop muscle memory. Any head, any face that I draw, it's muscle memory. I don't have to think about it, and I don't really have to plan, because I'm so used to doing that shape that my body just does it. It's the same thing with hands and fingers. I just do it because for years and years and years, my warm-up practice every time I drew was move my hand in different positions and draw it. And there's all kinds of different techniques. Again, it's, I think, a subject for another video. You can use all kinds of different techniques. Obviously here, I'm doing gesture drawing, but muscle memory, like, goes a long way towards developing artistic skill, and redraws are a good way to develop muscle memory. It's repetition, doing the same thing over and over and over again. We'll take a look now at some works in progress that sort of got abandoned and fell by the wayside, and we'll go through the various reasons as to why. And essentially what I'm trying to show you here is that, like, personal style is not only developed through, like, comparison of your old work to your new work and noticing trends in your work and making mindful changes in your work, but sometimes, like, it's perfectly fine to genuinely just abandon a sketch because the vibe is off, or you don't like the line weights, or maybe you can't get the composition to work for you. I tried to choose whips that, like, had all different reasons for having been, like, abandoned. So composition, like overall composition, technical elements, line weight, and then, like, aesthetic elements, product development elements. So we have a Miku keychain that is just not feasible to turn into a keychain because I couldn't get the product to look how I want. Aesthetically, it's not giving Cinnamoroll Miku collab at all. And then the second one is a compositional issue and a technical issue together. Love that, double trouble. And then our final abandoned whip is aesthetic reason, comfort reason, and style evolution reason. So we'll take a look at those, and then we'll sort of round off our conversation about, like, what works can be redrawn, what works should be redrawn, and is there any merit to letting things sort of be abandoned and go by the wayside? So let's take a look at my Procreate graveyard. So the first whip that I think could benefit from a redraw is this Miku. So she was supposed to be a play on the Cinnamoroll Miku, and it was going to be Cinnamoroll, Snow Miku, and Milk. This was supposed to be a keychain. In the end, I didn't super love the composition. I like the general pose, but I think that she would be a lot cuter if I redrew this in my current style. I also want to figure out a way to make, like, the keychain clasp a musical note. I think that that would be really cute since she's a Vocaloid, and I think that she lacks a little bit of Miku-ness to her. So some changes that I would make here would probably be to really, like, accentuate that this is Miku. Because at the moment, it's just kind of giving cute character with twin tails. I don't think this necessarily screams Hatsune Miku. So that's kind of why this was, like, left by the wayside. This was supposed to be a Christmas drop, and it later got replaced with my Christmas Krampus, which I now love because it sort of solidified for me the way that I do the bumpy line art. Check out my tutorial on that, by the way. But this Miku is left by the wayside until further notice. So this was actually a scrapped Inktober concept. You can see where I'm beginning to get the idea to have all my subjects sort of, like, framed. I usually do, like, a camera or a Polaroid picture frame. I just think it's fun, and it all came from this idea of having a composition that's being viewed through the lens of, like, an old Nokia or, like, a Razor phone. Remember when the phones used to be like, "Hello, Moto." I couldn't get this one to work. So I love the details. It's Euromanic based, and I love the composition. My problem with it is that it's very much in the in-between of my old anatomically correct style and the Y2K style. It's treading a line in a way that I don't love. I couldn't get the line weights to work for me. There's nothing I think technically wrong with it. It just doesn't feel good to render. Sometimes when my lines are too thin or a composition is too crowded, I don't know how to describe it. It bothers me, I guess, because the line weights are not feeling the heft that I'm used to. And so I just can't get this one to work for me because I get really frustrated. I think if I redraw it, I would have to commit to either the old style or the new style, or just unsort of crowd the composition a little bit so that the line weights can be what I want them to be, because I think I'm a person who has pretty hefty line weights. I definitely prefer a thicker line as opposed to like a thin and dainty line art. That's not who I am. So we need to kind of go way back to the drawing board for this one. I think that this would make such a cute print, and like that was the intention, but I think if I can find a way to make like the phone, like the camera part of the flip phone, so I guess the top of the flip phone, as like an acrylic charm or like an acrylic shaker, that would be cool too. So I know that there's a way to rework this. I think that Euromanic, they're sort of Sanrio characters where there's not really like much to do with them, because their head, like all of the detail is contained in the head. I have sort of the same criticism of like Pom Pom Purin or Cinnamoroll. In my version of Pom Pom Purin, I had to add a lot of elements from other Sanrio characters because a lot of the more popular Sanrio characters are just kind of plain by design, which is not necessarily always a bad thing, but sometimes it's hard to make characters that are based on them, like human characters, easily identifiable. So that's just sort of more of like a general frustration I have with redrawing Sanrio characters. But yeah, so this might be a print someday if I can get it to work. So this is the cream redraw that I started in 2025. Obviously we need a much younger looking cream. You can see that this is before I've really committed to the moe style. I think that to really get 8-year-old cream to look like 8-year-old cream, we would have to like really make the face look youthful, and so now would be a good time to lean into that Y2K moe style. I scrapped this because I just didn't have the time to do a full redraw, but I'm not super in love with it. I'm not super married to it, so this is due for a redraw anyway because I'm just not like feeling it. I've also redrawn Rudo, but I don't really do this style anymore, and so they're just kind of gonna sit in Procreate purgatory for a while because I have no incentive to render them. Because I don't really like drawing in this way anymore. So we need to moify Cream the Rabbit. All of these are examples of things that definitely deserve redraws. I think it would be really interesting to do redraws, even just for like an evolution of my style tracking purpose. What I'll most likely do is put it to a vote, because I think that in times like these, it's just like, it makes more sense to ask people what they want to see. So my mellow definitely is going to get a full render because people over on Instagram have told me that they really like the redraw, and then we'll consider the rest of these for a possible redraw for sure. If there's one that catches your eye, let me know in the comments section below, and maybe I'll make a whole in-depth redraw tutorial. I'm currently working on the in-depth Fluttershy redraw tutorial, and that's over 20 hours of footage. So if we redraw one of these and document it, it's definitely going to be a process and a half. So there you have it. Let me know what kinds of tutorials you would like to see next. As usual, this will be posted on Patreon, so please do check me out on there if you want to see exclusive content for free ahead of it coming out to the general public. As usual, big thanks to my patrons: Spicy Knife, Milk, First Last, Sakura, RocktricksP, Adie, Gwen, Cat, Leo, Blake, Noop, BigMonke, Delta, Necrowizard, Aku, Andrea, and Auri. Thank you all for joining me. Seriously though, please do come check me out on Patreon. There's a free tier, and it's got tons of resources for beginners, as well as fun little goodies. I post there almost every day. I'm super active on Patreon. Come check me out and see what I'm up to and what I'm rendering on Instagram. And, you know, come hang out with me on the second channel if you want to yap. I do vlogs. Okay, I kind of got it to wink. But until we meet again, stay weird and take care.